Hello everyone and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is July 19th, 2017. Tokyo Electric Power Company has announced, very quietly last week at first, that it is going to release into the ocean irradiated water that it has been collecting since the nuclear disaster 6 years ago. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Cucek. Michael, this is astounding that they are going to release this water into the ocean. Everyone's going to die.
No, no one's going to die. And the water has been cleaned of everything except the element of tritium. There's no way of getting the tritium out of the water. Tritium exists naturally in seawater. There's always been the realization that at some point the water that they've been storing is going to have to be released into the environment. Of course, you want it to be with a radiation level as low as possible, but there's going to be some radionuclides in it. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew this is the story. Nobody wanted to do it because, well, the fishermen off of Fukushima will just absolutely scream bloody murder. And guess what?
Hit me again, please, sir.
They're screaming bloody murder about it.
Sure. But, I mean, everyone has seen the photos, the aerial photos of the land around the reactor. It is just inundated with these tanks and these bladders, you know, just brimming with irradiated water.
Yeah. And the water has been pushed through a cleansing process that takes out most of the various radionuclides. But there's simply nothing more that can be done with the water, and either it sits on site forever, or it's released in a highly diluted form into the ocean.
Well, isn't it normally released after it goes through this cleansing process in every nuclear plant?
That seems to be the story that Tepco is saying. This is normal.
Right.
Unfortunately,
because the water goes through a cooling process.
Well, it goes through all kinds of procedures. But the thing is this concept of normality, which unfortunately the fishing cooperatives, which are politically and socially very important, and because they were completely disenfranchised and impoverished by the original Fukushima disaster, which had countries all over the world banning seafood from Japan and then banning seafood from the area around Fukushima. Right. And certain areas of the seacoast still have species that are unsafe to eat, according to the analysis of the fisheries people. Any bad news is blown up way out of proportion. Right. And so even something that is unavoidable, there is this bizarre sense that all you have to do is just refuse, and that'll stop this problem from happening.
Well, it is a lot of water.
It's an incredibly large amount of water with a very small amount of tritium in it. 770,000 tons of water and a few milliliters of tritium spread through that entire mass. Now,
but, I mean,
it's a PR problem, not a scientific problem.
But they were storing it there for a reason. I mean, they didn't want to release it.
Because it hadn't been cleaned yet. But now they have a large quantity of water that is as clean as it's going to get.
Okay.
At which point you have either the maintenance issues of maintaining these gigantic tanks, which are not designed to last for very long, and you're fighting, therefore, not science. You're not fighting with science, you're fighting against it, and you're fighting based on a PR issue, a public relations issue, having to do, again, with the fishing cooperatives.
So you think this is just an issue of the sky is falling, and perhaps the fishermen, they're going to complain, they have a good complaint, but they're going to complain until they get a payoff, and they can buy better boats and maybe new nets and reestablish the fishing industry.
The thing is,
that makes sense, though.
Yes, but does the government have a payoff that hasn't already given them? You know, many of them lost their ships in the tsunami, so they've had those replaced. Many of them most of the port facilities were destroyed. They have been replaced. They have the physical infrastructure that the government should have been using to bargain with them. Right. Instead, it's all been given away already. So they can complain without and delay and in some way impel the government to react. They have all the cards in their hands and they're playing them.
It's interesting how this issue came up. The minister actually is taking the fisherman's view.
Of reconstruction, yes.
Right. But he's also said, although I don't have the power to really decide this issue is being decided by Tepco, as it should be.
Well,
the ministry has a role in it,
No,
but
the government,
not the minister.
the government has the final say, but it's not his ministry. It's not his business. He is the reconstruction minister, which is supposed to be leading the revival of the Tohoku region and Fukushima.
And this minister is from
He's personally from
the area.
Fukushima, and he says, I sympathize and I understand. I would not, if it were my responsibility to decide this, I would not allow it because I can understand the feelings of the people. But he then says, but it's not mine.
Right.
So I've made my statement, but I don't have to stand by it.
Tepco is no longer a standalone company owned by stockholders. It is basically taken over by the government, and the major stockholder is the Reconstruction Authority.
Yeah, and but it's again, it's not. They clearly cannot do it of their own. It's not a corporate decision. It has to be a decision of the government to allow this activity, and the
ministry is who is the ministry?
Well, the Environment Ministry would have to have the final say on this release, that it could be done in such a way that is environmentally at least damaging possible. And certainly they would get that from this administration. The problem is the political, the atmospherics, the way it looks. And speaking...
Well, that's why it was quiet in the first place.
That's why it was quiet in the first place. And it was brought up in Newsweek on the international level.
Tempest in a teapot.
Yeah, there's a tempest in a teapot, but those make always brew the best tea. And in this case, the tea has tritium in it.
Right.
So that they are really stuck because there's no positive way to spin this. There's only negatives, and it would require decisiveness. And this is a time period, of course, when the Prime Minister himself is suffering from a serious blow to his personal popularity, and therefore there is not the sense of, damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead. It's, we're going to do this. Oh, did we say that? Oh, but we have no choice to do it. And it's an incremental trying to get to where it is that the release can happen.
But don't you think we'll wake up one day and read the newspaper and just discover that the release has already started and it'll continue for the next 4 days?
That's often the way it happens, is that it's done in the middle of the night, the process is started, and that's it.
Well, they actually announced it is a foregone conclusion. We've already made our mind up. It is going to happen.
Yeah, and the thing is that you would want it to have been done differently, that you get the public on your side and then take action. But that has not been the way that this administration has worked so far.
Right.
They have not spent a lot of time prepping stuff. Instead, they go immediately to a decision. Mr. Abe's sudden declaration of, I want to change in the Constitution by 2020, without even talking to the members of his own party, is part and parcel of this fait accompli,
ready,
too late.
shoot, aim.
It's
right.
Or shoot, ready, aim. Whatever, it's not in sequence. It's just, here it is, it's done.
Okay. We're avoiding, I think, the obvious danger that is present just by having all of the water there by itself. I mean, isn't that a calamity that could happen should there be another
it will be a PR
shake?
problem for one of those tanks to collapse, and in time, they will do so.
They'll fail.
They'll fail. And as they fail, that would be proof of failure.
How many tanks are there? I mean, there are 500, 600 of these tanks?
No, there must be more than several thousand now on the site. And they're huge. They're like tanks at the refinery. And they're all filled with this mildly radioactive water that has to go eventually somewhere.
Well, there are other tanks that have more than mildly radioactive.
There are some things that are
just poisonous.
That's just incredibly poisonous. And certainly decommissioning the reactors, which eventually has to happen, is being pushed forward in time. And so I can see with the fishing cooperatives, they're saying, well, heck, the rest of the cleanup will be going on. Just leave the water on site and have maintenance take care of it. But eventually it will be released into the environment, and by that time, global warming will probably be such that we won't care about it anymore.
Okay, well, let's talk about the energy mix here in Japan. They were reliant on the nuclear power probably up to around 30%, 32%?
Yeah, a third of their power at the height of it. Yeah.
And now where are we? We've got 5 reactors that are working?
Yeah, it's a very, very small percentage of
47 are just, they're not mothballed, they're just kind of...
Well, the six that are at the Fukushima Daiichi site are all gone. And many of the older plants, ones that are either at 40 or above 40 years of age, they're not even trying, for the most part, to try to bring them up to code. They're just going to be taken out. And unfortunately, there was a big build-out in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. That means that a lot of the reactors that exist they're at their 40-year cutoff point. So the world energy prices in terms of hydrocarbons have been very low, thanks to the shale oil revolution, thanks to low economic growth around the world. They're picking up a little bit, and Japan has been just absorbing the cost, particularly switching over to natural gas.
Right, coal and gas are the big ones, aren't they?
They're the big ones. And the CO2 emissions, Japan has not been in any way able to get close to the promises that it made in terms of the Paris Accords or the Kyoto Agreement. That being said, anything that slows down the restarts, and that's one of the reasons that it's been so hard to dump this water, is because it affects the restarts decision. The atmospherics about restarting nuclear power plants, saying that they're safe, and while at the same time we're releasing radioactive water into the environment. It doesn't work as a story, as a political tale that you can tell. At that point, it's just been delay, but they're reaching the end of the road.
Renewables are really starting to pick up here. You're aware of, over the last 5 years or so, everybody in the world coming here with their solar panels and building solar panel farms and bringing in, sometimes not great equipment from China, but some from the United States.
But there's a lot of empty land in Japan, and that's getting filled up with various, mostly photoelectric solar panels.
And that technology is really starting to take off.
And it's distributed. It's not managed by the electrical power companies. Tepco, even though it's not a fully independent company anymore, it doesn't like those distributed networks of power generation.
Because they want it to be theirs.
They want it to be theirs. They want it concentrated. They want it to be in a form that they provide. But electricity has been deregulated on the retail side.
Right.
That's one of the few reforms that Mr. Abe and his administration have actually done. And while I myself have not changed providers, you probably have not changed providers.
No, we have.
Oh, you did?
And also at home, we've changed providers.
Okay, tell me about the experience.
So somebody comes knocking on the door saying, we can save you money. And of course, my wife says, show me how much money I can save you. And it's not really significant. Over 2 years, it might be samman gomayen.
It's not a bad amount of money, though.
Okay. And sign here, and we will be your provider of choice.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. And with that, there's going to be price pressures, and mostly what's going to happen is these legacy nuclear power plants just don't fit into the new pricing schemes. Right. And restarting them doesn't fit in the right pricing schemes. And it all comes down to, what are the people willing to accept? And until now, the release of this water has not been one of those things.
One of the interesting kind of sidebars to this is we're going to have a new ambassador pretty soon, probably in mid-next month. And one of the issues he's bringing is this trade imbalance between Japan and the United States. And one of the ideas that he's bringing with him, apparently, is natural gas. You buy your natural gas from us, and that's going to have a positive impact. I mean, it's a raw material. I would prefer it be more
better
value
us
add,
than the Russians.
That's right. You're going to pay somebody for it, so why not us?
Yeah, the LNG offer is really significant in terms of the United States-Japan relationship, and we'll see with new Ambassador Haggerty what he's going to bring to the table. Be that as it may, we need to understand that we have to let science rather than passion run this issue. It's simply, there's a time limit on those tanks, and when it comes, they have to be emptied.
Right.
And Unfortunately, politics doesn't work on the long term in this case. It only works as far as the next election and on a very, very, very excited 24-hour cycle.
Right. Tepco has announced that it is going to release 777,000 tons of irradiated water into the ocean. This is likely to happen over the next couple of days. Please keep your eye on this one because it has implications for Japan's energy mix. It's a big issue. Stay tuned.